On the program, President Tinubu removes Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mele Kyari, and dissolves its board. The Independent National Electoral Commission rejects petition to recall Senator Natasha Akpoti-Iduaha. And in entertainment, we review some recent controversies and mixed reactions of some trending issues in the gospel ministry. I'm Ademola Lawrence, and this is live from Abuja, a show that takes you through the events that have shaped the week in Nigeria and across the world, from politics, news, entertainment, and sports. And we begin with President Bola Tinubu's recent removal of Mele Kyari as the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. This comes along with the other board members, which has drawn many reactions from Nigerians. However, advocates have praised these moves, stating that this is a courageous step towards reforming Nigeria's oil sector and tackling entrenched corruption. They said Mr. Kyari's removal will allow a full investigation into alleged fraudulent refinery project, and is urging the new appointed leadership of the NNPC to prioritize an audit of past projects and ensure accountability in the sector.
Bashiru Ojulari is the newly appointed Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. He is a renowned Nigerian engineer and expert in petroleum, processes and production engineering. Mr. Ojulari has had an illustrious career spanning over 3 decades, holding various leadership positions. He was once the managing director of Shell Nigerian Exploration and Production Company from 2015 to 2021. He has worked in Europe and the Middle East, showcasing his global expertise in petroleum engineering and other related fields. Ojulari has served as chairman of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, Nigerian Council, and is a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. He was appointed managing director of SNIPCO and general manager Deepwater in November 2015. After retiring from Shell in July 2021, Ojulari became chairman of BAT Advisory and Engineering. After retiring from Shell in July 2021, Ojulari became chairman of BAT Advisory and Energy Company.
So again, for us, we feel that
Amadu Musa Kida, chairman of the board, is a seasoned oil and gas professional with a distinguished career, including serving as the deputy managing director of Total Oil.
To establish democracy in sports.
NNPC is currently in the final stages of preparing for an initial public offering. The company has been engaging with prospective investor relations, executive and investment banks in line with capital market regulations and the Petroleum Industry Act, which mandate a stock market listing. As a fully commercial entity since 2021, NNPC Limited is required to raise funding independently without recourse to state funds. The appointment of Ojulari and Kida signals a strategic move by President Tinubu to revitalize NNPC Limited. With Ojulari's international experience and Kida's industry expertise, the new leadership is expected to focus on increasing oil production, enhancing refining capacity, and driving operational efficiency. This change is aimed to position NNPC Limited for a successful IPO and to strengthen its role in Nigeria's energy sector.
And joining me live in the studio is the Group Business Editor of Daily Trust, Sunday Ogu. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I think that, now let's discuss as journalists.
Yeah.
And this is a topic that, I think, first of all, it was a shock for many. It wasn't a shock for some. Because they felt like, okay, it's been long. Since 2019, Mele Kyari has been at the helm of affair at the NNPC. It was during his time, it now became NNPCL as well. So Mele Kyari out, Bayo Ojulari is in as a business editor and as a journalist. Are you part of the people who say, finally?
Yes. If I want to be sincere with myself, yes.
Okay.
Because from the number of years I've spent in the beat, watching corporate organizations evolve, usually when a new project takes off, You don't want to take off with people that are coming into that project with the mindset of how things used to be. They will always be the ones who would say, we have always done it like this. Why do you want to change the process? Even with governance in countries, when you do a referendum and the prime minister is against something and people want a different direction, usually he would throw in the towel and said, okay, since you want a different direction, obviously you will require a new leadership to head in that direction. So most industry watchers are taught that with the full implementation of the PIA and the transitioning of the NNPC, to the NNPCL, that you require a different kind of mindset to move it forward. It appears that the NNPC is still stuck greatly in the bureaucracy, that brought it to this level. Yeah. Quite a number of changes had happened. Over 100 senior officers had been asked to go, but it appeared that, the board was made up of people who were largely appointed on political grounds. You still have processes that are not completely evolved. And so you clearly see that place required a different kind of person to move things in a different direction.
So let's look at Mele Kyari's performance in 6 years. How would you rate his performance? How would you rate his style of leadership? What has his style of leadership been able to contribute to the economy of the country?
So this is a difficult question to answer in a sense, and it is because whatever you can't measure, you can't evaluate. So in the proper measurement, the question would really be, what did he meet? And where is he living in? Okay, he met refineries in a commercial state, but we have seen that refinery contract for a turnaround happen over and over again. We have seen deadline, especially under his administration, move about 5 times since 2019, and the costs are not getting cheaper because FX is also becoming a challenge. So today people would say Port Harcourt and Warri are working, but in the grand scheme of things, what is Port Harcourt really doing? 120 trailers, if that is the case, into our market is almost like spitting in the ocean, compared to what Nigerians really need to do. In terms of our share of local coal production, have we moved? Substantially? There had been an announcement that we had touched 1.8, 1.7. We are not exactly sure what those figures are, but every year our budget figures talks about the potential to do 2.2 million barrels per day that we have never really got into. So there are several metrics you may want to use in measuring. As I speak to you, even with Port Harcourt and Warri working and the Dangote refinery on the sideline, we are still doing substantial importation of oil. Last quarter, we did over ₦1 trillion in the importation of refined products into this country. So that alone should tell you how much we are doing domestically. You and I are testimonies to how much we buy a liter of oil now. So it's a difficult question to answer. It appears that he has made some efforts, but it clearly, from the body language of the president and the target he seemed to be setting for this new board, it appears he had expected far more than these guys had delivered in 5 years.
Let's look at what the president put into consideration before he actually relieved him of his duty on the board. Now bringing up 11 board members to oversee whatever is his agenda and for the economy of the country. And you look at it, I think one of the things that was actually played down is the amount of barrels that we produce per day. From what I read, the president wants a situation whereby we're able to get to 3 million barrels per day, by 2030. And it's looking like in this current administration that he is heading, and if Mele Kyari still continues to be NNPCL, it looks like they're still moving in circle, they will not be able to move forward. Do you think that also justify why he has to remove them and the board? And also looking forward to how, I remember that NNPCL was still talking about the crude being sold in dollars.
Yeah.
And that's also a major challenge because we are trying to strengthen the Naira. So how do you just suppose that you have to sell in dollar and you want to strengthen the Naira? That's all of that.
Let me be very clear that this president has been gracious to Mele Kyari. All the sensitive institutions in the country have had a change of leadership since he came. He had recruited people he feels, would drive his agenda for the sector. But he was given a chance. He's one of the very few CEOs left that transitioned from one president to the other. So in fairness, he got his chance. And the other thing that we need to also put on record is the fact that this is the first time in the history of the NNPC that we have had a board with this caliber of people.
You mean the current board?
Yes.
Okay.
We have 5 persons in that board that are good enough to be the GCEOs. I mean, if the president had wanted. So we have a crack team that is apolitical. They are not coming because of their political lineage. These are people who have proven capacities in some of the finest institutions in the world. And so that is why no matter what sympathy you may want to show to Kerry, you cannot discountenance the fact that everybody in this board is what is onions. What I like also is that a good number of the guys in the board had at some point in time also worked with the NNPC. So I'm sure they understand the opaqueness of that system. You know, there is also the frustration by the governors of with the NNPC with regards to revenue repatriation. It appears, I mean, you remember one time for nearly 11 months we got nothing into the Federation account from the NNPC on account of settlements of one kind of obligation or the other. So the opaqueness with which the NNPC board had operated is something that baffles a lot of Nigerians, and they think that should change. Essentially why most stakeholders are talking about transparency as a watchword for the new guys. They are coming from institutions that have a governance practice that are some of the finest in the world. We want to see that translate into, I mean, an institution cannot sit over our common patrimony and we don't understand what is produced, how much is produced, how much is sold. We don't understand how they keep celebrating that we are doing 1.7, 1.8. And then we are struggling financially with regards to dollar repatriation and all of that. If you say this is a private company, then the principles of private holdings should come into full play. We don't understand why there are delays, for instance, in going to the capital market, where their operations will become even more open and more Nigerians can participate.
You know, that's even very surprising.
You know, so every time, you know, I mean, when you submit yourself to those kind of institutions, you submit yourself to more openness. You submit yourself to cross-border examination. And that way you don't need to go beg anybody to bring in the FDIs. They can see you. You are like an open sheet. And if they trust what they see, naturally they want to come into the systems. And that is what this board brings into place. It doesn't take away from whatever Kerry may have achieved in his life. In fact, he's one of the longest serving GCEO, GMD of the NNPC.
So it is right for him to achieve whatever he achieved.
Of course. You know, and we don't expect any less. Matter of fact, we had expected more. You know, going by all the timelines that they had given, you know, till today we don't exactly know what's going on with Port Harcourt. Something happens there today, there's a denial, the next day they say we are back in operation. There are all kinds of stories about, and you know, there are also stories that abound that this management convinced the presidents against divesting from some of those investments. So if as a Nigerian who is interested in sweating our asset to the maximum value, what sense does it make for a government-owned company to be running the Port Harcourt refinery right now, with what we have seen with Dangote? Does it also make sense that we have a government company running Warri refinery or attempting to run Kaduna refinery, with the history that we have about how inefficient, with due respect, that government, state-owned enterprises have been run? So if you bring in people who have always been businessmen, who understand efficiency and all of that, maybe they will begin to think differently around those assets, and we can get in some money that are useful in other sectors of our economy.
Okay, so I also, well, before we talk about, you know, what you expect from Ojulari's leadership as he comes in, you know, last year I think NNPCL declared that they brought in like $17 billion investment into the country. And now the president is looking at a situation whereby you can have by 2030 $30 billion and all of those things. How feasible do you think that can be, looking at the track record of, you know, the people who are on the board already?
So these guys are internationally proven. These guys understand what needs to be done. So they are not people who are coming to learn on the job. If anything, if they can get the efficiency of the NNPC to the levels of the private companies that they have headed, we would have made some progress, whether it's in terms of dispatching with procurement, in terms of signing off on this, in terms of enabling FIDs on a lot of their JDPs. We would have made tremendous progress. You know how procurement work in government-owned institutions and how they work with the private sector. Exactly. You know that this thing that you need to fix would enable several other things, and you're slowing down on this. Essentially, you cannot get the results that you want to see. There are so many important projects, especially in the gas space, that are critical to the kind of investments, critical to the kind of revenues that we want to make, that has to be enabled and driven professionally. So those are some of the things they will be looking to enable almost immediately. Those are low-hanging fruits. We have to change the way we do business. If the NNPC appears to be in too many things, that seem to be slowing their capacity to manage all of this, I say, why can't you divest from some of them and concentrate on the ones where you put in minimal effort but get maximum output, and so that will be it. And the government charge, the president charge is very clear. I want you to move this investment we have attracted from 17 to 30. That's a big deal. You now need to look at all those dormant assets that have been lying down that are not being sweated. Exactly. What you need to do to get an extra barrels of dollars from those places. Yeah. Look at us as a country with all the potentials we have. We, in the face of everything that happened between Russia and Ukraine, when prices of oil shot up, we missed out of that windfall completely because our house was not in order. Exactly. And all of the crises happening around the world are actually opportunity for other people. Yeah. How ready are we? Today, the likes of Saudi Arabia and the rest are talking about increasing production, even though they are operating in multiples of where we are. And even our OPEC reserves has not shifted in nearly 15, 20 years because we can't even meet up with whatever they are giving us to do. And that's a shame because prices are not stable, so you can make up with quantity, and we don't seem to be doing those quantities right now.
Interesting. So while we'll just round up, so I'm going to lump up two questions together. The president is also expecting like 10 billion cubic of gas to be by 2030. That's a tall order. Yes. And the president has always believed that Nigeria has gas even more than
That's the reality.
That's the reality. And it seems that we are not even harnessing that enough. Now that this removal, so you answered that. Now that this removal and replacement has been done, and this is like the bigger picture to what the oil sector is supposed to do. How do you think that this will help enhance the economic landscape of Nigeria going into how it affect the world in general? Okay,
so Nigeria has always talked about diversifying, but you can't diversify in space. You would diversify within the context of the infrastructure you have that would support the operation of the non-oil sector. So if you want to enable industrialization, so many things have to happen. You've got to have power, you've got to have road infrastructure, you've got to be refining in country. You need funds to enable these soft and hard infrastructures. And right now, the only probable thing that can give us that fund, to enable diversification in the scale that we want to see, is oil. That is what Dubai did. Now, you and I don't think of Dubai today as an oil nation. Yeah. We think of it for tourism, for all kinds of things. But it was the oil money that enabled those other aspects of production. And that is why the kind of attention that the oil industry keep getting in Nigeria is key. And you don't blame why several presidents have in the past made themselves petroleum minister. Obasanjo did it. The last president did it. The current president is the substantive minister of petroleum, because they understand that if we are able to harness as much resources as we can from what appears to be finite to be a wasting reserve, then we can build the other sector that are sustainable. But that has to happen with the money from this sector. That is why we need to get everything right. These guys understand the agenda of the president. And remember, the president has spent a better part of his life working in the multinational. So he has a fair understanding of what needs to happen. Exactly. And if the drivers don't seem to be heading in that direction, or even if they are headed in that direction, but they are not applying as much speed as he wants, he's got the liberty to bring in people he thinks can fly on that route and give him results. Because at the end of the day, the president is evaluated on results, not on action. So we have come to the place as a country where we should desire that all of the government-owned institutions or enterprises are run by some of our finest brains. They are not institutions for any kind of patronage.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is only when these institutions are effective, are efficient, that we can maximize benefit from them and deploy in the other areas of our lives where everybody can touch. So today, people want to buy cheaper fuels.
Yeah.
That can be enabled by the NNPC if they get their acts right. People want the Naira deals to be sealed. Yeah. It appears the kind of fracas we were seeing between the Dangote refinery and the Bele-Kyari-led board, that was going to be very difficult to achieve, even though that conversation is enabled by FEC and the Minister of Petroleum. But ultimately, it will be operated by the NNPCL and the Dangote. Maybe personalities were becoming an hindrance to the continuation. They didn't say it clearly, but the undertones of the language used in those communications showed you clearly that the parts were not cleared. So people want to see that issue resolved so that that deal can continue and we can continue to see them drop and some kind of respite for that. People want Port Harcourt, Warri, and ultimately Kaduna to come on stream and refine the substantial part of our local usage. We want to see local refinery hit about 700 barrels per day. It will take some serious action, and people with proven track record. It's only Nigeria that we go to a game keeping our best 11 on the side and going in with our reserves. We don't have time right now, and we need all of the best hands possible to engage this.
Thank you so much, Sunday Ogo, business editor for Daily Trust. Thank you so much.
The gratitude.
It looks more like a journalist.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.